Welcome, everyone. Welcome, and we would like to welcome you to our webinar today. It's the React Research in Action webinar entitled Supporting Activist Writing, a Conversation with Social Justice Editors. I am Amber French. I'm managing editor of the International Center on Nonviolent Conflicts blog, the Minds of the Movement blog. And I'm also project co-lead of the React collaboration alongside my partner, Peter Tinborg of Action Aid Denmark. And this webinar is being brought to you today by an additional partner, Beautiful Trouble. Before I introduce the webinar, I'd like to start with a poll. We're going to do 3 quick questions, and I think it will help us just do a bit of a warm up. Adriel is my colleague, Adriel Fernandez. He's based in Washington. Myself, I'm based in France. And Adriel is helping us with tech today. And Adriel, would you please queue up our first poll? I have added the questions. And I'll already let you know the first question so you can already be thinking about it as we get it queued up. The first question. All right. What do you hope to get out of this webinar, or why are you here? Why are you here? Networking, writing opportunities, writing tips, recruitment of writers, learn how to better support activist writers, share how to better support activist writers, or learn more about ICNC, Beautiful Trouble, and or Action Aid Denmark's work. You can go ahead and select more than one if you'd like, and we'll give you about 15 more seconds to answer. We'll wait until we get up to about 20 respondents, perhaps, if we can. Great, yeah.
And I'd say,
Okay,
don't forget, you can scroll down. There are
you can scroll down.
other things. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess you can do all the polls at once. I'll go ahead and ask the second question. How do you best identify as an organizer, as an activist, a writer, blogger, journalist, editor, publisher, or interested person and/or interested person? I'm sure you're all interesting people, but are you an interested person simply in this webinar? And finally, perhaps a more mystical question. If a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? That's an opinion question for you. So go ahead and take another 15 to 20 seconds to wrap up, please. We got 44 out of 62, 68 participants. So yeah, we can go ahead and shut down the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, everyone, thank you. We can go ahead and end the poll. Adriel, share the results. So lots of people here for writing tips and to learn how to better support activist writers themselves. Those are the top 2, but it's quite a balance between the different. Lots of people looking for writing opportunities as well. I'm sure that many of our panelists are excited to hear that. We have a lot of activists and organizers as well as writers, so makes a lot of sense. But we have a couple of editors, publishers, journalists as well. But a lot of you are activists or organizers. Great. And lastly, okay, does it make a sound? Yes. Okay, well, we'll come back to this question perhaps a little bit later, but we can all sort of keep it in the backs of our minds. So let's go ahead and I'd like to pivot already to introduce today's webinar with a little bit more detail. We can go ahead and unshare the poll results. So this is the second thematic webinar that we have organized since the beginning of the React collaboration between ICNC and Action Aid Denmark, which began in January 2023. The React collaboration is based on 4 key principles. Addressing understudied areas and research, lesser known cases and realities. 2, engaging activists and organizers as authors and guest editors. So as content providers, but also as content catalysts themselves. 3, focusing on issues, collaborators, cases, networks, and stories from outside North America and Europe. And finally, experimenting with new and engaging formats, including multilingual content. and today's webinar. So writing is a central building block of our collaboration. We are joined today by a broad spectrum of panelists, editors, writers, activists, organizers, publishers, and researchers, all of whom, like many of us on this webinar, have composed identities. For example, some identify first as organizers and last as writers, while for others it's the opposite, and so on. So for clarity, I would like to straight away define the terms that I chose for the content of this webinar. I myself, I chose the terms activist and activism. Those are the terms that I'll be using. I chose them based on what I myself have perceived over the past decade of working with ICNC as widespread usage among English speakers in various parts of the world to characterize their engagement in the extra institutional political strategy of nonviolent resistance for rights, justice, and freedom. There are many alternative terms to denote what I mean by activist and activism. So I would like to go ahead and invite everyone to share their own terms in the chat now, if you'd like. And while you're at it, why not introduce yourselves, if you would like. As for defining nonviolent resistance and other terms that I'll use like nonviolent action, civil resistance, it is a mode of political action in which ordinary people leverage their human agency in a planned, collective, and strategic way, using nonviolent tactics such as marches, boycotts, street theater, parallel institution building, and hundreds of other types of action to press toward greater rights, greater justice, and freedom. Only local communities can define where a tactic lands on the spectrum between violent and nonviolent based on their own specific context. It's not up to any single NGO to make that call. But all I do know is myself is that there's a huge difference in terms of conflict dynamics and long-term impact. The goals of today's webinar, then I'll hand it over, then I'll introduce our moderator, Nadine. We can go ahead to the second slide here, Adriel. Thank you. The goals of today's webinar are, and one more. Well, now you have all of our beautiful logos, and we can go ahead to the next slide. The goals of today's webinar are to bring more intentionality to the topic of activist writing, to enable better support for activist writers, to spark more activist writing. That's my own personal goal, although of course, not every activist needs to write or should write, but many of you would do the world justice, for lack of a better term, but actually that's a great term for it, by writing. And then to facilitate networking between editors, publishers, activist writers, and those who wish to grow their politically engaged writing. And lastly, to have a critical and open and productive conversation about the power dynamics that underlie activist writing. I'll introduce Nadine now. She is our fearless moderator today. Nadine Bloch, we can go ahead to the next slide. Nadine Bloch, sorry, I believe it's Bloch, is an activist artist, a political community organizer, and a strategic nonviolent actionista. She is training director for Beautiful Trouble, and her work mainly explores the potent intersection of art and politics, where creative cultural resistance is an effective political action and a powerful way to reclaim agency over our own lives, fight oppressive systems, and invest in our communities, all the while having fun while we're doing it. She is author and co-author of numerous books, guides, reports, and blog posts. She's written with Minds of the Movement, and she writes about movements and organizing, among others. She's also written with Waging Nonviolence. Fun fact about Nadine is that Nadine can walk on stilts. And she's also lived aboard tall ships and even had a captain's license, all in relation to her activism. So I'd like to hand it over now, without further ado, to Nadine for introducing herself and our speakers and whatever else you have lined up for us, Nadine.
Thank you so much, Amber, and thank you everyone for joining us today. in this conversation. Really looking forward to hearing from our panelists. And we have a fabulous collection of panelists, as you all know. And love it. Yeah, also, if you felt like introducing yourselves in the chat, please go ahead and tell us who you are, where you're calling in from, what you consider yourself, activist, organizer, facilitator, interested party. Love to know it. And if you work on a particular or with a particular group or in a particular issue area, feel free to drop that in the chat as well. And today is a webinar where you may notice that we're online as a webinar, which means you have two options for leaving us notes. And I'm going to encourage you right now to find the Q&A feature, because it will be much easier for us to answer your questions in the Q&A as we've enabled the chat. And as everyone knows, things get lost in chats very quickly. So the Q&A feature for the webinar today will allow you to drop a question that we can come back to and answer when we take comments and discussion together. Thanks so much for that. Great. So again, really glad to be here. Thank you, ICNC and ActionAid, for organizing. I come from and work with a group called Beautiful Trouble. We are dedicated to making revolution irresistible, as the famous American writer Toni Cade Bambara noted. And we will be introducing everyone one by one up front, and then we'll go through several rounds of questions for our panelists. So you can get a really great idea of who's on the call and drop questions into the Q&A, for example, if you'd like to do that. And when we get to the point of having a group discussion after the panelists have all given us some of their opinions and takes on the world, we can offer you several ways to be involved. One would be chatting in the Q&A, one would be putting comments in the chat itself, and then one would be, hopefully we can figure out how to unmute people. So we're really glad that you're here. All right, let's jump into meeting our presenters. So if you could turn to the next slide, that would be great. We're going to meet Arzu Gebulayeva, and she is coming to us as a board member and an editor of Global Voices, which she's been there for about more than 14 years, sounds like, since 2010. She's an Azerbaijani columnist and a writer, has a special focus on digital authoritarianism and its implications on human rights and press freedom in Azerbaijan, extraordinarily important in this moment globally, I would add. She's written for Al Jazeera, Eurasian Net, Foreign Policy Democracy Lab, and many others, and is a regular contributor at IWPR, Observatoria Balkani y Caucaso, and Global Voices. She launched Azerbaijan Internet Watch, which is a platform that documents, monitors, and looks at information controls in Azerbaijan. And here's a fun fact about Arzu. She ended up in journalism by accident, and I'm assuming that she'll tell us a little more about this. It started with a blog back in 2008, and she has not stopped writing since. So we're really happy to welcome Arzu. Our next presenter will be Eric Stoner, and we have a little slide on Eric as well. He's the co-founding editor of Waging Nonviolence. And if you can switch the slide, and we'll have a little picture of Eric, I hope. There we go. Oh, yes. And there's an arrow in case you can't see where Eric is in the photo at an action on COVID. Waging Nonviolence is a nonprofit media platform that covers social movements and activism around the world. I hope some of you have visited that site. If not, it's time to do it. Since 2009, it's published original reporting from contributors all over the world in more than 90 countries. He also teaches civil resistance at St. Joseph's University in New York. He's reported from Afghanistan and the Philippines. Some of his articles are nationally syndicated and his op-eds are nationally syndicated and have appeared in dozens of newspapers, from the San Francisco Chronicle to the Minneapolis Star Tribune and even Newsday. He identifies as an activist. We're going to hear some more from Eric as well, mainly with the U.S. anti-war movement. And here's a fun fact about Eric. He lived in a community of Jesuit priests in New York City and once unexpectedly spent his birthday in jail for civil disobedience. I have also done that, Eric. Maybe we should compare notes sometime. That's great. So thanks, Eric, for joining us as well. Our third presenter is Feroz Manji, and he is a Kenyan with more than 40 years experience in international development, health and human rights. He's founder of the Daraja Press, the prize-winning Pan-African social justice newsletter and website Pambuzuka News and Pambuzuka Press. And he also is a founder of Fahamu, Networks for Social Justice, and a host of the online interview series Organizing in the Time of COVID. He's also an adjunct professor at the Institute of African Studies and a contract instructor in Carleton University in Ottawa, Canada. He's a fellow at the Robert Bosch Academy in Berlin and a visiting fellow at the Kellogg College, University of Oxford, an associate fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies. So he's busy, as you can tell, many of our presenters are. He's a member of several editorial and editorial review boards, including the Global Critical Caribbean Thought, NCOCO, to name a few. And another fun fact about Feroz, he spent 3 years in jail as a prison dentist. So we could maybe hear some stories about that. And I'll add one more thing. Feroz has a couple of entries in the Beautiful Trouble toolbox on neoliberalism and poverty. So we're really glad to welcome Feroz to our panel today too. And finally, but not least, since I went in alphabetical order, Lawrence Cox is a Dublin-based writer. He's a teacher and a researcher who has been involved in many different movements since the 1980s. He's edited many activists' work as a co-editor of Interface, the academic and activist journal for social movement research. Lawrence has written and edited 15 books, ranging from an ebook that supported the Zapatista delegation to Europe to an Oxford University Press hardback. So we have quite a lot of diversity there. The book was called The Irish Buddhist, the Forgotten Monk Who Faced Down the British Empire. With Supta Chattopadhyay, Albert Arribas Loanzo, and Anias Solucha, he's just edited the Handbook of Research Methods and Applications for Social Movements. And we're interested to look at that one, which emphasizes research from and for movements and experiences from the Global South. Lawrence is also a professor of sociology at the National University of Ireland, Maynooth, and has been writing for ICNC's blog, Minds of the Movement, since January 2020. Here's another fun fact, this one about Lawrence. He's helped set up 2 Steiner Waldorf kindergartens. I'm sure there's some good stories in there. So we look forward to our panel. As we get started, we'll just remind folks that we anticipate that all of us would agree to some basic group agreements and principles. We'd like to have all of our panelists, and when we get to Q&A, all of us speak for ourselves and respect each other's humanity. And if possible, as Amber said in the beginning, if you can define your terms and use them consistently, we'll understand how you're using the terms in your own context. So this sounds very exciting. And I think we can stop the screen share so that you all can see all the panelists' lovely faces. We're going to, as I said, do a round of 3 rounds of very short questions to get to know our panelists, give everyone an opportunity to chime in. We have 3 questions. We're going to ask folks to respond for about 2 minutes. It's very short. And then we're going to open it up to a bigger conversation. So the first question is, we'd like to know from each of you, what's your relationship to writing and to activism? Or if you'd like to say, what's your relationship to activism and to writing? That's also fine. So we're going to start with Arzu. So love to have you. Thank you first for joining us, and thanks for kicking off the questions and answers.
Well, thank you for having me, and yeah, for organizing this interesting conversation. So, I guess to the question, what is my relationship to writing? I was thinking about how to answer it the best way I can, and I guess. So I'm originally from Azerbaijan. I grew up in Azerbaijan, but I spent half of my life living abroad. And right now I live in Turkey. And, you know, as a result of all these transitions and switching countries, I also learned to speak multiple languages. And I think writing, to me, or the relationship I have to writing, is it's the best language I speak in. Of all the languages I speak, it's the best language I speak in. And I can tell that even by my conference and panel presentations, when I go off the script, it's a big soup. But when I stick to the text I put together, it's really how I really can express myself. So that's that. I guess that would be my answer to that question. And my relationship to activism, I think the best way to describe it would be to say that I've kind of been shadowing movements and activists for much of my journalism career. Back when I was still in Azerbaijan, when I was working in Baku, and actually started my blog at the time, I was part of various formations and groups and movements. I was never actively involved in them, but because I know the people who were organizing or who were setting these initiatives up, it was this friendly / journalist relationship. And so because of that, I've kind of found myself being in these movements, and because I already had a blog and started writing professionally, I had this additional way to tell their stories. And so since then, that's how I kind of see myself when it comes to activism movements and talking about it, trying to get to know the groups from within and try to really tell the stories that normally one would not hear or read about, or just be the bridge between the cause and the group and the wider audience. I'll wrap it up there.
Thank you so much.
Of course, the other questions.
Great. Thanks, Arzu. And we are going to be coming around again, so we look forward to hearing more from you. I love the theme of writing is my best language. And then you can tell us what language you write in later. That would be interesting to me. So I'd love to pass it over to Eric. Same question for you. You know, what's your relationship to writing and to activism, or to activist writing?
Sure. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, everybody. Looking forward to meeting you. Yeah, I started off more as an activist, actually, kind of in the early 2000s. In the anti-war movement here, with a group called the War Resisters League. And we were organizing around the invasion of Iraq and then Afghanistan. And so that was kind of my entry to this world of movements. But I pretty quickly realized that even doing that work, I was focusing on research, and started to try writing, and realizing that I felt like I enjoyed that, and felt like that was a way that I could kind of contribute more. So I do see myself as an activist, and I've tried to be a part of or a participant, at least, in a lot of movements that we cover on waging nonviolence. But I've never really seen myself as an organizer per se, because I think that has a certain kind of skill and quality that I haven't developed. But I kind of ended up, getting involved in doing my own freelance work for a number of years, writing for newspapers and magazines, and then 15 years ago, starting Waging Nonviolence with a couple of journalist friends, and have really shifted in recent years into this editorial kind of capacity. And I do feel like now that I still try to do some writing on the side, but my primary kind of identity, I would say, is as an editor and a teacher. So I do feel like that has been the way that I feel like I can contribute the most to the movements that I care about, is by helping writers tell their stories and to share them with the world. So, I do see like media as almost its own form of activism. So it's not that I'm not engaged in activism or movements, but that like this is my way of contributing, and that like media is not maybe appreciated as the important kind of support role that it plays for a lot of movements.
Yeah, really, really appreciate that perspective, Eric. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention at this point, as someone who writes for Waging Nonviolence, I appreciate an excellent editor more than I can ever actually express. I wish for everyone an excellent editor. And I thank you, Eric, for your contributions. So let's go to Feroz, and same question. What's your relationship to writing and to activism? And you've got your 2 minutes.
Thanks. It's great to be on this webinar. I'm dyslexic, and so I have enormous pains related to writing, and so I have a deep sympathy and empathy for militants who are trying to give expression to their struggle for freedom, for their struggle for human emancipation, to help them get across things that I find difficult to give expression to. Put me on a platform, I will talk for an hour without any notes. Put me in front of a piece of paper or a blank screen, and I don't know, some ghost takes over. And for me, there is no distinction between writing, publishing, editing, and engaging in struggles for the reclamation of humanity, or the invention of what it means to be human. The kind of things we publish is about those struggles, to try and give voice to those who are engaged in those struggles, and to be part of those struggles. I think there's a tendency amongst activists to decry theory as something that's outside the realms, but theory without praxis is as meaningless as praxis without theory, and I think that's the kind of thing that we try and struggle to articulate.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much, Feroz. And I will go to Lawrence to bring us home on this particular question. And I really do appreciate the focus on struggle. Some of us, and I'll have to admit, I think in this moment, I do not consider myself a writer, though I have written many, many things, because it is such a struggle. And I really appreciate that emphasis on engaging in struggle at all levels, whether it's in writing or in definition setting. So Lawrence, take us home on this one. What's your relationship to writing and to activism?
Yeah, I mean, what people have said, I really just agree with. We have so many needs, so many of them are not met. We are not doing very well quite often in our movements in trying to push in the right direction. So I've been in movements since the 80s, started with anti-apartheid, anti-war. As you get older, there are some kinds of movement infrastructure, education, writing that you can also contribute in, but I would say also rather than instead of. I do quite a bit of activist editing, media, books, different kinds of things. One thing that Amber asked me to talk about specifically is I do quite a bit of research, and particularly what I do is I support activists who are researching their own movement's practice. So doing participatory action research with other activists, asking what is it we're doing, what's working, where is it not working? And I think that kind of collaborative, collective writing is really crucial if we want to have more of an effect in the directions that we value.
Oh, I love this. Thank you, Lawrence, for emphasizing this. And a lot of us in different movements are constantly looking at, learning, measurement, and evaluation. And it's very helpful to have someone support you do it from your own movement's perspective, which is not always the case. So really, really appreciate that. So we're going to do another round and like to transition. And some of you have already sort of touched on this. What's one key piece of advice on how editors and others, how you yourself can better support activist writers? And are you willing to go backwards? Lawrence, are you willing to take this on as the first?
Sure,
Good.
sure.
Excellent.
So I'll say a couple of things that might be a little bit more complicated. Writing is always for a specific audience. It's communication, it's an act of politics, and therefore the key question is distribution. Who is going to read this thing that you're writing? And helping writers to see that that's what they're doing, that they're not writing for their teacher or writing for God or writing for their ego, but writing as communication. That's crucial. And then to think through this very old three-way division. There is agitation, there is education, there is organizing. Agitation, we're talking to people who are not yet active. We want them to become active. We're going to reach them through maybe mass media or flyers or whatever. Education, we're talking to people who've become active, but don't see what the structural problems are, who need to think it through further. Organizing, we're talking about with people who are already experienced at doing it, about the thing that we're doing and how we could do it better. What we are doing to achieve the structural change that we need.
Excellent. Thank you for kicking off this conversation about how editors and others can better support activist writers. And I do really appreciate the focus on the goal of your writing. Like if the goal of your writing is communication, it leads you down certain pathways. So let's see, that would then go to, well, this is going to challenge my alphabetical things. Firoz, I think you're up next.
Okay, thanks. I mean, I think Lawrence has made a very important point, and that is, who is the primary readership? I mean, one of the things I find really struggle helping people to understand is that you can't say it's a community, you can't say it's the university or the government. You have to focus right down very specifically. If you can actually identify one individual who actually represents precisely the audience here, it is there's a paradox. The more focused you are on that, the more generalizable becomes your message. But the second thing I would add is that in any piece of writing, whether it's a book, article, thesis, so something people have a lot of difficulty grasping, and that there has to be only one governing message. It has to be driven by the need to deal with one and no more than one issue. And it's surprising how difficult that is. People wander around on so many topics that it becomes blurred. And the ability to do that. And I would say the third thing is really the issue of whose voice is being represented. And you know, I talked about, you know, our trying to reclaim humanity, and you know, that has to be one of the driving forces of right, in my view. I have a wonderful quote which I sent to Amber yesterday from a Ghanaian philosopher, Ato Sechi Otu, who writes, "No one needs the language of universalism more viscerally And no one speaks that language more eloquently than those precisely because of their intimate knowledge of abject exclusion and dehumanization, voice their incendiary fury and self-affirmation in the name of the human. For me, that represents all the aspects of what I seek to have published through Daraja Press.
Wow, that is great. I hope someone can put that in the chat, that whole quote, so we can read it again. And while I'm saying that, I'd like to remind people to drop questions in the Q&A. You can find, if you're on a computer or on your phone, smart tablet or something, you should be able to find a Q&A link at the bottom of the screen for the webinar, so we can keep tabs on questions that are coming in. Thanks, Feroz, for posting that. Awesome. Let's hear from Eric. What's one key piece of advice on how an editor or others can better support activist writers?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's hard to follow that for us. That was really beautiful. I totally agree with what you've said and what Lauren said. Yeah, my basic thought was just that having good relationships between editors and writers is similar to maintaining good relationships in general, which I think often comes down to good communication and having kind of developing some baseline of respect from the get-go. And that often means, like, from the first conversation or first email, having done a lot of freelance work myself, I've had a lot of frustrating experiences kind of, sending out pitches and not getting any responses from editors, or having them take forever to get back to you, or not giving you any kind of feedback. And so I think we've really tried to be responsive and be honest and give as much feedback as possible, both like in the setup for the article and also in the kind of comments and edits that you make in a story. So really doing as much as you can to explain your thinking. I think that's really key. And and yeah, I think clarity just upfront is so important, right? Because writers need to kind of know what your expectations are and what for me, what we need to make a story work for the site. And that comes down to our, like Lawrence was saying, kind of our understanding of our own audience, right? And for us, we are at Waging on Violence, we're always trying to explain, how people are building power and trying to affect change. And that means kind of digging into the strategy and tactics at play and the challenges and next steps of the movement. And so I'm always asking writers to kind of develop that element. And I think also, if we're trying to reach an audience that isn't already totally committed, it means trying to get beyond platitudes and not come off as PR or kind of propaganda for movements, which is going to limit a story's reach and impact. And so we're always trying to get writers just to be also honest about their experience and the challenges they face. And, we don't have to, we can talk about our vulnerabilities as well and the things that we're struggling with. So I think that's important. Yeah.
Yeah, really appreciate this, Eric. And I really like the challenge to those who publish and those who edit to incorporate our principled approach as in understanding response and supporting of developing writers and reporters as part of developing our inclusive, feminist, human rights-based beloved community, or whatever words you want to put in there, that supporting each other on the way to do this work is really critical. Love that. Thank you. So Arzu, you get to take us home on this one. Do you have a key piece of advice on how editors and others can better support activist writers?
Yeah, for me, I guess both as an editor and as a journalist, recognizing the challenge of countries that are being pitched about / the movements, and because not all countries matter equally, unfortunately, in this day and age, at least based on my experience in the world of journalism and reporting, and finding or presenting the right platform or stage for the writer to be able to actually talk about a country that often doesn't really get mentioned unless there's something big happening in that country or something bad happening in that country. And I think in many ways, the platform that you've mentioned when introducing me, Global Voices, is actually trying to do as a platform covering multiple countries, offering writers to contribute. Unfortunately, it's voluntary based, but still, it kind of addresses a wider range of countries, addressing a wider range of issues. And I think that is, I guess, an advice / challenge as well, because finding that right platform is difficult. But as an editor, being able to offer that when someone comes to you, and perhaps maybe, direct them to the right place, is what I would say be my piece of advice.
Thank you. That's great. That's a great way to end this, and also segues perfectly into the last question for the third round of questions for all of you. And then we'll open up after this round for a Q&A. So please feel free to drop questions in the Q&A. If you can't find it, oh, I see one just went in. Good job. And if you can't find it, it should be on the bottom of your screen or the bottom of your smartphone. Or you can, if you need to, drop it in the chat and we'll move it over. So we'll do maybe a free-for-all. We're going to look this time at what outlets do you particularly manage and what opportunities do you propose to activist writers who are listening to this webinar? Those of us on here who are interested in getting our writing out there. So let's hear from you all. Let's start. Feroz, can we start with you about any outlets you manage and opportunities you can propose to activist writers listening on the webinar right now?
Well, I mean, we're a publisher. We would, as I've given expression already to the kind of materials that we are looking for. And if you're working with movements, or you're working with people who are engaged in struggles, we want to hear, we want to find ways of having their voices be given expression. But also, we have no staff, and we publish 20 or so books a year, which means there's an awful lot of work. And if there are any who would like to volunteer time, want to learn a little bit more about publishing, we have an expression at home: you can't buy a cow that doesn't shit. And so there's always shit work to be done, okay? And so I'm not saying that's all you do, but you'll have lots of good milk, but it does mean cleaning up the shit, and so there's lots of that going on. But I don't want to discourage people, but we would welcome people being involved. We'd like to be able to interview our authors, do podcasts, etc. But just time seems to disappear.
I totally appreciate this. At Beautiful Trouble, we also talk quite a lot about the slog and the joy. And what you go for is that the joy there's more time with joy, or the joy is more intense, so that it's more important than the shit work, right? That's really what we've got to do. But I love this. You can't buy a cow that doesn't shit. We'll be using that later. Awesome. Lovely. So, Eric, would you like to go next and talk about outlets that you manage and opportunities that you can propose?
Sure. Yeah, my primary outlet is Waging Nonviolence. And yeah, almost everything that we publish is freelance. And so we don't have any staff writers. So a lot of the stories we publish come in as kind of random pitches that we get into our emails. So we're very happy and excited to get to meet and to work with new writers. And a lot of the writers that we publish maybe haven't written before or published before, or they are primarily organizers and haven't written. And so, we feel like that is part of our contribution to movements, like I said, is that we often will work with writers that other media might not, because sometimes the first drafts come in pretty rough and require many rounds of edits to get into shape. But we are happy to do that when we feel like there really is an important story to tell. So I would just encourage anyone who would like to write for us to reach out, and hopefully we can find something to do together. Also, this isn't public yet, but we're planning to develop a free training for folks that want to learn how to write about movements. And we're hoping to launch that later this year. So if you pay attention to the site or follow our newsletter, you'll hopefully learn about that opportunity. And it would be great to get to know and work with you in that capacity too. So.
Really appreciate that. And I would say it's from what Feroz and Eric has said, just starting, and whether I think many of us started doing things as volunteer capacity for the love of what we were doing as being really important. And to emphasize it, maybe just, really put your stuff out there, submit, write, practice writing. And Eric also has pieces on the waging nonviolence and Beautiful Trouble as well. And maybe all of us, I don't know, have had things published on waging nonviolence. And we really do appreciate that platform and the highlighting of different and the interrelatedness of different platforms. So when you volunteer with one group, you'll get connected into the field. So Arzu, do you want to go next?
Sure. Actually, I really feel that I'm in a very similar place and position to Eric, especially when we get contributions from non-writers who are just really eager to try themselves in this field, or who are eager to tell a story and really be published. And yes, often, 99% of the time, actually, the first drafts are not even nearly close to being a draft. And because of that, actually, I've been a volunteer contributor to Global Voices for more than a decade, but I've been a regional editor with the platform since 2020, I think, if I remember correctly. And I didn't realize at the time when I was writing for them as a volunteer, but Global Voices actually has a writing guideline, a style recommendation that any writer can access. And we actually share when we get pitches from newly starting writers, we share it with them so that they can follow at least and have an idea of what we expect of them as contributing writers. And then we also have various areas in which Global Voices kind of focuses on. There's a little bit of advocacy part, so a lot of stuff on censorship, freedom of expression, freedom of the media, and whatnot. There's something about language and culture, and we have a really great newsroom with regional editors, but also sub-editors who speak multiple languages or come from different cultures, so that it's not as hard to explain yourself when you pitch a story. And finally, just one thing to add on Global Voices is that every now and then we have call for pitches on a specific project/topic. Right now, we're running a Ukraine-focused project, and we have been receiving really, really interesting pitches from Ukrainian writers, both who are still in the country or who've left. And I think this is very important addition to GV, because now we can actually commission stories, because as I said earlier, one of the downsides of writing for Global Voices is that we can't financially reimburse authors. But other than that, I freelance as well. And what I've learned over the years is that it's great to stick with certain publications that you freelance for. And so, some of the publications that you mentioned, Nadine, when introducing me, I've been working with them for more than a decade now. And it really kind of helps with pitches, because the editors are the same and the style is the same. And so we're used to working together. But I too have had very interesting interactions with editors who would disappear after expressing interest. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally appreciate that. And if there's any way to drop a link, maybe that's already happened in the Q&A to your style guides and resources available, that would be really great. I know that at Beautiful Trouble, just as a side note, if you've looked at our website, it's very gorgeous. Like a lot of us are artists, right? And designers. It's based in Google Docs. Shh. And everybody, all several hundred people that contribute, write in a Google Doc. And our website is crawled from the Google Docs. So, and that is to help, it's in a template, very clear format that people need to fill in. And then we upload it into the web. So there's a little piece about templates and style guidelines that could be really useful. And I think we have one more, Lawrence, right? Can you tell us the outlets you manage and opportunities that you see for activist writers?
Yeah, so I'll drop one in the chat. That's journal called Interface. So this is for activists reflecting on their own activism. What have we learned that we can share with other movements, basically? So it's quite focused. Yeah. And it's even more focused because we organize it regionally. We don't think that these things can just translate from anywhere in the world to anywhere else, any social position to anywhere else. You need to really think about that. We're very open to people there. I will say in exactly the same way Feroz has said, we struggle. It's really hard work. There is nobody involved whatsoever. So I want to say two other things to people who are thinking about this. One is create your own. Do not wait for somebody else to set something up or to present you an invitation, because power, wealth, cultural privilege, all these things we're fighting against, they're right there in the media and publishing. These are political spaces of struggle. Yeah. So don't be sitting there thinking, where is my opportunity in a neoliberal way? Think in a political way. How do we create, find, revive, support the outlets that we need for our movements? The other thing which hasn't been said, but it's not unique. Think about language. We've got, for a whole variety of reasons, the world has got very Anglo-centric, very focused on things going through what makes sense in London, what makes sense in Washington. Most of us do not live there, and most activists do not think very well in a second language. They're doing their own activism through their own language, which may not be the nationally dominant language. So think very seriously about the politics of language. We really try to push multilingual publishing as much as possible, as does obviously ICNC very effectively.
Totally appreciate all these comments. Wow, what a lot of food for thought here. And I think now it's time. We've got some great questions in the Q&A, and we have, I know, comments flowing in the chat. I'm going to turn it over to Amber to start us off with the Q&A for the panelists. And I think we'll read a couple of questions together and allow you panelists to chime in as you will on the different questions. So Amber, you want to take it away?
Sure. Would you mind if I share one reaction and then pivot to questions? Okay. Just wanted to put it out there on Lawrence's last topic of this gets to the core of the whole reason we wanted to have this webinar, is to explore the power dynamics in writing. And with this, React collaboration, it's been growing. And we now have a couple of different ways that people can interact with us. So I just wanted to add those into the last questions. They're very important, and we want to hear from you all. We are willing to engage in partnerships with people who are producing editorial content from their local communities about movements. And we can also offer guest editorship if that sort of model is desired, to have some sort of training if people feel that they don't have the skill set to be a catalyst of writing in their communities. So we have those two options: either partnering with us and we just you know, we are able to put your content on our website. There's no questions asked. You know, it just has to be about movements and activism and political, you know, engagement. And then if there's people who feel that they would like to skill build, then there's that option as well. So yeah, I just wanted to add that. And I would like to now ask the first question. We've been receiving questions from participants in the audience. Robin Boardman, he asks, do you think a path in academia strengthens activist writing, or does grassroots organizing give better down-to-earth experience? The best question. And I will, let's see, Nadine, how about you? Yeah, I think you're the best positioned to sort of field this, or if a particular speaker would like to chime in. I don't know how you want to do that.
Yeah, I'd love to just have folks unmute or raise their flag. The panelist flag who'd like to address it looks right, like Feroz is on it. Go on, do it.
Well, I mean, I think, you know, the point that Lawrence made early on, and who's the audience, and in academia, the audience is a very specified academic audience who are not necessarily engaged in any struggles apart from the struggle to get tenure. And so I think it's a real problem we have in that sense. But it's not to say that what appears in academia is irrelevant, and it's a question of therefore understanding what is being developed there. There are those who are both academics and engaged in struggles, but they are sadly few and far between. And the more they write, the less the possibilities of tenure appear. So it's one of the. It's about power, as Lawrence raised.
Yeah, fascinating. And Arzu, I saw your hand go up too. And then Eric, yeah?
Yeah, I wanted to share an anecdote. So I was attending an academic conference, but that was all faculty members of communication departments at various universities. And a lot of these researchers, PhD candidates, they were doing research about journalists, about media, you know, dissecting the field from various points. But none of them actually have done journalism, and none of them had, you know, in-field, hands-on journalism experience. And I remember I was a speaker at the conference. All of the panelists were actual researchers or writers. And that's how I ended up at that conference. Otherwise, what was I doing there? But I remember there was one discussion about safety of journalists. The research was focusing on the safety of journalists online, or I don't remember exactly. It was a couple of years ago, but I raised a question and asked, like, have you actually spoken to these journalists one-on-one, and have you done more research with the companies and looked into safety mechanisms? And they were like, oh, this is a really good methodology question. Let's add it to our methodology and keep expanding our research. And I thought it was fascinating. So when it comes to, like, I have this, you know, view of academia and academic writing / journalism, but that is all to say that it really depends on whether or not you're willing to change the language in which you write, because I've also worked with academic writers who are very against changing their style. And it makes it really hard for me to explain to them that we can't have this kind of structuring in storytelling, or at least in what they were trying to tell. And also, if they're willing to, you know, get their hands dirty, as in, like, actually get involved, do a little bit more research, and not just like write about it, but feel the story and then tell it.
Yeah, I thank you for that. And Eric, I think I see you really wanting to chime in also.
Yeah, I think that there's a certain kind of jargon that comes in both of those kind of roles and spaces. So, you know, if you're trying to do journalism and reach a wider audience, you know, I think it's important to, you have to do work on either end to kind of translate kind of the language, right, that you would use in an academic space or in a real organizer space to reach folks that aren't already plugged in and kind of with it. So I think there's like work to do with both of those roles. I do kind of maybe just have a personal bias towards feeling that organizers, like being an actual organizer, gives you better preparation to write about it, because having that real experience doing the work, I think, is really, really important. And so, so yeah, that's maybe my own bias, but I do really appreciate the kind of contributions of academics who have helped us understand and make sense of things. But yeah, I think the key is like trying to make sure that you're willing to work through kind of the jargon that makes sense in your community or your internal kind of group, and being able to translate that to a wider audience. So.
Perfect. Yep, we're going to let Lawrence contribute. I think also it's worth noting that all of us on this, all of us panelists and facilitators actually teach in some fashion or another, whether it's in a formal setting or an informal setting. So this, I think we all wrestle with identifying the specific individual audience. Remember, as we talked about, like, who are you writing for and what is your goal of writing? And that's something that I think everyone who writes has to wrestle with. And it's not just about academia and activists. It's also about organizers and general public, if there's such a thing, the uninitiated, whether you're trying to agitate, educate, or organize. So I'll turn it over to Lawrence to tie up this question, hopefully.
Good to know about that, but I wanted to say just two more general things that can be helpful. So one is a lot of people, a lot of activists, when they come to writing, they don't know any other world than their own. And that world could be middle-class Southern England, it could be a village in Kenya. The experience of being able to think into other people's worlds really, really strengthens your writing. To speak out of your own, to be who you are, but not to assume that everybody else listens and speaks in the way you do. That's really important. The other thing that's really, really helpful is to read good writing. And that does not even have to be good political writing. It could be good poetry or whatever. But to get this freedom where you see things that are not just your national newspaper and social media posts that are kind of very, very, you know, stylized, generic, that you've got that freedom to go, how do I find the way of writing that will help me do the thing that I need to do with the people that I'm trying to talk about? So those two kinds of freedom from being imprisoned in your own way of speaking, and freedom from being imprisoned in a way of writing.
Yeah, totally appreciate that. Wow. Okay. Well, I hope somebody actually uses all this to write things up themselves at the end. Your answers to these questions yourself. And I'm going to, we have some fabulous other questions in the Q&A box. We're going to throw another couple of them out there. Amber, it's okay if I go ahead and pick a couple? I have a particular soft spot for looking at mistakes and not positive experiences. I think that we learn a lot from them. So there's a question here. It says, from John, in your writing, editing, publishing along the way, what mistakes have you made and what did you learn from them? And I would love if folks, Feroz is laughing. I would love it if people wanted to share a small anecdote. Just pick one, something that might be appropriate for right now. We have lots of other questions. And this question may overlap with another one from Daria about writing evolving, and in particular mentioning the use of AI in this. And so perhaps there's some reflection on self-publishing on social media and increasing the use of social media platforms and templates for getting ideas and knowledge out there. I just think there might be some overlaps between learnings and mistakes in AI, but if not, no worries. So let's go. Firoz, you're unmuted and you're laughing. Would you like to go? And then looks like Arzu. Yep. Great.
Yeah, looking back, I think the biggest mistake I ever made, and which I see lots of people making as well, and that is to think that facts change minds, and they don't. It's ideas that change minds. Facts can act to support the idea, but it's not the other way around. You go to court anytime, you watch a lawyer, they present their case and then the evidence in support of that case. And I think that's a big mistake people, which I made. I mean, I remember when I finished my master's, I wrote this incredibly boring piece, which I thought would have, just fact after fact after fact, complete waste of time, and it took me a long time to learn that no, it's the ideas that are really important. That's what drives change. That's what it reaches people's hearts, not just their minds, and I think that's the clue to it.
Thank you. Arzu.
So I have two comments, one more general and one personal. Well, actually both are personal, but you'll see what I mean. So I think in the context of Azerbaijan, it's a small country, it's an authoritarian state, there's crackdown on journalists all the time. And I think our biggest mistake at the time for many of the journalists in the country was to assume that whatever we write is actually going to make a difference, and that it's going to inspire people, it's going to change people's opinions of the government or the corruption or whatnot. So now, or not now, I mean, it's been a while for me, but I think coming into writing wearing this idealistic view of what your profession can do, for me, was a mistake. That was interesting experience, a learning curve for me. And the other comment I wanted to make, it's not so much of a mistake, but something that I've learned recently. I was working on a story about LGBTQ rights in Azerbaijan, and it was actually a text accompanying a photo essay that was done by a Russian producer who escaped Russia when Russia invaded Ukraine. And because of his family ties to Azerbaijan, he actually came to Azerbaijan as his first destination. And during his stay, Russia adopted this restrictive law that prohibited sex operations in the country. And so he was very deeply affected by it. And he thought that maybe it was a good time to start looking into the LGBT community in Azerbaijan. And that's how he met a bunch of activists. He got involved with the community, and he came up with this photo essay. That photo essay was called They. So he pitched this project to an outlet then reached out to me and asked if I would do the interviews with the people that he has photographed and accompany the pictures, except I actually had to speak to the photographer himself first. And what I learned from that experience, because he told me one story, and even from the start, like as soon as we started talking, I knew that he didn't get the full picture of the situation in the country. He was comparing the situation in Azerbaijan with Russia, where things are far worse. And of course, what he was seeing and what he was hearing made it sound that things in Azerbaijan are actually not as bad, whereas in fact they're bad. And so for me, it was a learning experience, because this was the first time I was working with someone who's already done pictures, but then I knew most of the protagonists who were pictured photographed for the project. And so I tried to change his original thoughts in the story based on the interviews and based, of course, on my own sort of coverage of the situation in the country. And I think that was a learning experience for me. I didn't think that you can actually shift that during the work, and yeah, I thought if anyone has similar experiences or will experience it, it's possible to be that person who is actually changing the narrative around the story.
Yeah, thank you for those. That's great. Lawrence or Eric? Yeah? Eric, is that your real hand raising?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Just a couple quick thoughts from my own experience when I was starting writing. I started writing for my local hometown newspaper around the invasion of Iraq, and I was just so angry. I was so upset with what was going on that I was writing just in the most inflammatory way that I could imagine, because I wanted to shock people and shake them up. And they published all these letters to the editor that I wrote, and they published all these negative critiques, nobody agreed with me. And and I felt very righteous, that I was just said it in the harshest way possible. But I kind of realized that I wasn't, again, yeah, maybe thinking of the audience and trying to figure out how do I frame my points and arguments in a way that might reach them or might break through. And so I feel not being so driven by your anger or, that's what kind of fueled me in my early days of writing. And I felt like it often didn't translate well if I was trying to really reach people. And then I think another thing that I did, and I see with a lot of first time writers, is that I was super precious about my word choice. And so I felt like I chose exactly the right word in every case. And I was very resistant to editing. And I think the more experience you get as a writer, you realize that editing usually helps, and that they're trying to help you. But I think when you're starting off, a lot of times, at least for me, it was I chose that word for this exact reason, and I kind of needed to realize to let it go, and that it's important to have other perspectives and that help you kind of shape your writing and reach people. So
Really appreciate it. Go ahead, Lawrence.
Yes, so the anarchists used to say, kill the cop in your head. What I want to say is sack the teacher in your head. Because more and more is not just true in the global north. People have encountered the written word in the classroom. And what people have really learned to do is to write for somebody above them who is judging them. And if we're very conscientious, we're inner driven, there's often quite a lot of that going on. And it's really quite a challenge. It was for me. I see it in a lot of younger people. To kind of, very gently and kindly take that relationship with, I'm trying to impress this person above me, and go, no, I'm trying to talk to my peers. And go, no, this is a conversation in the schoolyard, not me trying to write for teacher. So that's definitely a mistake I've made, and I see it's not just me.
Yeah. Totally great. Really appreciate these responses. And we have some other good questions coming in as well. I'm going to hand it over to Amber in a second. One thing I just want to add, because actually I often call myself a cultural worker, not I'm an activist, I'm a writer, I'm a puppetista, whatever, but I'm a cultural worker. I consider writing part of the tools in an activist toolbox or activist tool belt. And in order to wage any of them effectively, it actually means that you do it within some kind of strategic thinking, some kind of strategic planning. And writers, artists often like to go by themselves into a room and think that whatever they're going to produce is going to make significant change, as was mentioned already. And in fact, what we need to do is get out of that room and talk to the communities that are leading the struggles. And you yourself may be a directly impacted person, but unless you're connected to a strategic process or planning, whatever tactic you choose, whether it's the most effectively written and edited piece on the planet, may not deliver the results you want unless it's within that framework or connected to organizing strategies. So that is definitely a mistake I've seen myself and other people make, just to put it into strategic thinking context. So Amber, what do you got for us? Where do we want to go from here in our last 15 minutes?
Sure, sure. Well, I wanted to add one thing to the conversation, which is I have not heard a lot this word yet, and I'm surprised. I haven't heard the word voice a lot in this conversation, perhaps a little bit, but not as much as I would have. If I were a panelist myself, representing myself in my capacity of managing editor of Minds of the Movement, I tend to be very focused on voice, and I think it's important to raise in the context of this webinar because. To me, finding one's own voice is finding one's own freedom. They're indissociable, and we can literally write ourselves to truth and write ourselves to freedom. I am probably a very extreme advocate of activist writing. I don't hide it. I asked the question at the beginning of the webinar, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? I asked that question because I think there's an analogy to be made to activist writing, which is, if a tree falls in a forest and no activist writes about it, did it really happen? To me, no. But I'm an extremist on this, and I want to see a world where activist writing floods the internet, floods printing, floods publishers, floods journalism. I'm a bit of an extremist on it. I think that others might have different views on that. I think the question is raised of like, should every activist write? I think there's a big debate there. And I'm on the end of the spectrum of yes, but yeah, so I just wanted to raise the question of voice, and I think it's important to talk about it because when I just got an electric charge when I thought of this is as soon as I've accompanied a writer, an activist, to the point of finding his or her own voice, I see a change. I see a transformation. It's like it's an immediate aha moment of, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be using my own voice and writing my own truth. And one thing that happens so often is that I'll be looking through some writing, some of the blog post drafts that are sent to me, and I can tell that it's a bit starchy. I can tell that there's inflexibility, there's rigidity, there's constraints, and the person hasn't found their voice. And and then I see that the person actually wrote me in a message or in an email or in comments in the Word doc exactly what they meant in their voice. And I just say, can I copy and paste it into your draft? Because this is the voice that I want you to write with, and it goes back to what Lauren said about always writing for a teacher. It's hard to unlearn that. So anyway, I wanted to bring out truth, voice, and power because I think they're themes that are coming back. And this connects a little bit with the next question, which comes from Johnson Jung. I believe that Johnson, you wrote for us Minds of the Movement a couple of years ago. You were one of the first bloggers with us. And you say, thank you, panelists. Were there moments in your lives where you feel that activist writing was losing its meaning, like writing does not reach to the other side? Writing was met with cynicism, for example. Has this happened to you, and how did you navigate it? So yeah, were there moments in your lives when you felt that activist writing was losing its meaning and not reaching the other side, he says, met with cynicism? Nadine, who would like to answer that first?
Lawrence's hand was up earlier, so
Okay.
maybe you want to answer the other question and then take it away.
Yeah, I mean, these things connect. So actually, this is something that's happening to me now, and it's happening to me because of the shift to social media and the way in which social media has changed. That even 5 years back on Twitter, and really strongly now, I feel there is no point in me writing this stuff. It's just not working. And what that connects to is the question of who is producing the media, who is distributing this. So I'm going to take what Amber and Eric have said and just turn it around a little bit. I've often had quite bad experiences with editors because I've had a different purpose to them, because they are telling me this is what our mainstream media audience wants, or this is what our academic audience wants. And I'm going, okay, but I'm actually trying to speak to other people and to say something with a different purpose. But the challenge is, and you see it in the questions, in the framing here, we've largely lost the imagination that we can create our own media. Now, even 20 years ago online, we did this with indie media. In the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, I spent so much of my life standing over a photocopier, putting stuff into envelopes to post out with a Gestetner printer. And the more you go back, the more our movements did this. Yes, so that self-published stuff, Daria's question. People were doing this when I was growing up in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union, underground. They were printing illicitly, illegally, distributing in all sorts of ways for activist purposes. We now find it very, very hard to imagine anything other than, oh, can I get this into the New York Times? Or something that we imagine as a kind of second-class equivalent of the New York Times or an academic publisher. We have to get back to actually making our own means of communication. Of course, that's what all of us here are doing, but we're such a drop in the ocean. Yeah, and that's really crucial about bringing out our voice, because the voice at the end of the day is the voice of somebody in conversation with an audience of other people that we know because we are in the same political project as them, albeit mediated by a radical publisher or whatever it is.
I totally appreciate that. I think we have like 2 minutes, honestly. If anybody is dying to add from Arzu, Firoz, Eric, to add one more thing, go ahead,
Very
Arzu.
quick.
Oh, and
Sorry.
Firoz also. Okay, so you can each have 60 seconds. Go ahead, Firoz.
All right.
Go for it, Arzu.
I would actually comment to what Lawrence also said. I think the audience has also changed. When you go back to the times of, underground, especially underground printing, from what I remember hearing stories from my parents from the Soviet times as well, there was much more interest, much more demand. And I think the audience has changed. Call it being lazy, call it being afraid, call it not interested in hearing about everything that's happening across, not only in your country, but elsewhere around the world. I think that also depends a lot on the audience, which brings me to the question of how do you navigate when you feel like, your reporting is losing its meaning. I think coming from a country where journalists have been sent in and out of prisons and media freedom has been suffocating and a lot of our actual media is exiled, you keep writing, you keep doing what you're doing because this is our soul, and this is what we believe in. And even if your website or platform is being censored, blocked in the country, or people are being thrown into jail for, coming to you and asking for your help, the message has always been, and this is what we've always said, whenever we talk about Azerbaijan, for instance, specifically, to keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Rose, can you do 30 seconds?
Very quickly. I think the issue of voice and the other is something that hasn't been sufficiently explored. It's far too much writers seeking to express their voice as opposed to becoming, to call it the midwife of people who are engaged in struggle, those who have become dehumanized or treated as dehumanized. The difference between talking about Palestine and having Palestinians give voice to their experience. And I think that's the voice I feel is often suppressed in place of commentary. And I think that's a very dangerous situation.
Yes. Thank you so much, all of you, for bringing your voice and your perspectives to this conversation. We are going to close out in just a minute. I'm going to invite people, though, to do something fun since this is a webinar about writing. We're going to do a chat storm, and that means I'm going to ask a question. You should write the answer, but don't send it. We're going to send it when I count down from 5 to 0. We're going to send them all at once. So there'll be a lot of things to read while Amber closes us out. And the question is, what's one thing that you're taking away from this 90 minutes we had together? It could be just one word. It could be a phrase. If you have time to write a sentence, go for it. But what's one thing you're taking away from this time we spent together looking at activist writing activists? So go ahead and type it in the chat box if you're willing. Then we'll be able to read each other's. I'm going to count down from 5 to 0. When I say 0, just hit send and we'll see the word or the phrase that people are writing. Here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Hit send. Let's see what you take away. That's really fun. And I'll hand it over to Amber. Thanks to ICNC and ActionAid and Beautiful Trouble for bringing us this fabulous conversation.
Thank you, Nadine. Fantastic, everyone. Thank you so much for your for sharing your truths and sharing your experiences and your perspectives, all from different parts of the spectrum in this whole world of combined identities. And yeah, we would like to keep in touch with everyone. We can go ahead and do a screen share real quick. Adriel, if you are on the mouse. And we're going to do one last quick poll. We would like to know from you if you're willing to share with us. Go ahead and share that last poll as well. We have one question for you. Yeah, writing is power. I love this. Thank you, ICNC. I'm more of an organizer. Yeah, solidarity. Academia is not necessarily irrelevant. I'll just read a few of these while Adriel's getting the poll set up. Fierce gratitude. Great. Thank you, everyone, for for your chat storm. And we'll probably do a word cloud of this and share it with our registrants. Okay, final question for you. As an extension of today's webinar, I plan to A, network with a new contact made, B, write about my activism or political engagement for myself, C, write about my activism, political engagement for an outlet, like a news outlet or one of the writing platforms that we've talked about, or another one that you know of. D, apply a tip for how to better support activist writing. What letter are we on? E. E, no particular follow-up. And F, I believe, not sure. And we'll give you another couple of seconds. All right. We are at 27 of 35, 42 people who are still in the webinar with us. Okay, great. We can close it out in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Great. So looks like there's going to be a lot of writing coming out of this webinar. That makes me personally very happy. But of course, you know, everyone has their own calling and everyone has their own priorities. So thank you very much for everyone. And let's go to the next slide. I think we're just basically showing you how to keep in touch. Yeah, this is this photo is from a brainstorming we did with a group of activists last year. What are your needs as an activist writer? And on this note, we would like to thank everyone. If there's any questions we didn't get to, there was at least one, then I'm going to ask the speakers to kindly share their thoughts on it if they would like in an email. I'll follow up with you all and then we can share their answers in the follow-up email. We'll be sharing a link to the recording for everyone by Monday of next week. And thank you very much. Thank you, Nadine. Thank you to our speakers, and thank you to our listeners.
A happy World Press Freedom Day, since it's happening tomorrow.
Great. Thank you.
Perfect. Speakers, feel free to unmute and say ciao.
Bye.
Hi, everyone.
Bye.
Cheers.